Chapter 4. The Counterpane. Upon waking the next morning, I found Queequeg's arm thrown over me in most loving and affectionate manner. You almost thought I was his wife. The counterpane was of patchwork, full of odd little party-colored squares and triangles, and this arm of his tattooed was all in dermal, Cretan labyrinth of a figure. No two parts were one precise shade, owing, I suppose, keeping his arm at sea under methodically in sun and shade. His shirt sleeves regularly rolled up at various times. This same arm of his, I say, looking for all the world like a strip that the same patchwork quilt. Indeed, partly lying on it was an arm. When I the arm first, I could hardly tell it from the quilt. And it was the only sense of weight and pressure I could tell that Queequeg was hugging me. But at the length of the past night's events sorrowfully recurred, and then I lay only alive to the commercial precedent. Though I tried to move his arm, unlock his bridegroom clasp, yet sleeping he was, he hugged me tightly. Now I strove to rouse him. Queequeg! But his only answer was a snore. Then I rolled over my neck, feeling as if it were in a horse collar, and suddenly felt a slight scratch. Throwing aside the counterpane, there lay a tomahawk sleeping by the savage's side, as if it were a hatchet-faced baby. A pretty prickle, truly, thought I. Abe here with a cannibal and a tomahawk. Queequeg, in the name of goodness, Queequeg, wake! At length, by dint of much wriggling and loud explanations of the unbecomingness of his hugging a fellow male in the mechanical sort of style, I succeeded in extracting a grunt, and presently he drew back his arm, shook himself all over like a Newfoundland dog, just from the water, sat up in bed, stiff as a pikestaff, looking at me and rubbing his eyes as if he did not altogether remember how I came there. Meanwhile, I lay quietly eyeing him, having no serious misgivings now. At last he jumped out of the floor. By certain signs and sounds gave me to understand that, if it pleased me, he would dress first and then leave me to dress afterwards, leaving the whole apartment to myself. Thinks I, Queequeg, under the circumstances, this was a very civilized overture, but the truth is, these savages have an innate sense of delicacy. It is marvelous how essentially polite they are. I pay this particular compliment to Queequeg because he treated me so civilly in conversation, while I was guilty of great rudeness, staring at him from the bed, watching his toilet motions, and from the time of curiosity getting better of my breeding. Nevertheless, a man like Queequeg you don't see every day. He commenced dressing at the top by donning his beaver hat, a very tall one. By and by, still minus his trousers, he hunted up his boots. What under the heavens he did it for, I cannot tell, but his next movement was to crush himself, boots in hand and hat on, under the bed. From symmetry, violent gaspings and strainings, I inferred he was hard at work booting himself, though by no law of prosperity I ever heard of any man required to be private when putting on his boots. But Queequeg, do you see, was a creature in a transit state, neither a caterpillar nor a butterfly. He was civilized enough to show his outlandishness in the strangest possible manner. Last he emerged with his hat much dented and crushed down over his eyes, and he very creaking and limping around the room, as if not being much accustomed to boots. Seeing now there were no curtains to the window, and that the street was being very narrow, and the house opposite commanded plain view into the room, observing more and more the industrious figure of Queequeg made, staving about with little else but his hat and boots on. I begged him to get into his pantaloons as soon as possible. He complied and then proceeded to wash himself. But at that time in the morning, any Christian would have washed his face. But Queequeg, to my amazement, contented himself by restricting his limbs to his chest, arms, and hands. Then donned his waistcoat, taking up a piece of hard soap on the washstand center table, dipped it into water, and commenced lathering his face. I was watching to see where he kept his razor, and lo and behold, he takes the harpoon from the bed corner, slips it out of the long wooden staff, unsheaths the head, wets it a little on his boot, striding up the bed in the mirror again against the wall, began a vigorous scraping or rather harpooning of his cheeks. Thinks I, queequeg, this using of Roger's best cutlery with a vengeance. Afterwards I wondered the less of this operation when I came to know what fine steel the head of the harpoon was made, and how exceedingly sharp the long straight edges are always kept. The rest of his toilet was soon achieved, and he proudly marched out of his room wrapped in his great pilot monkey jacket, sporting his harpoon like a marshal's baton.